So we do have some new developments in the Sony and Kadokawa situation, and I would like to say that this is actually the final part of it and we have received the good ending, but I do feel like that somewhere in the future there might still be an opportunity for Sony to completely buy them out, because yes, as of right now it has been announced that Sony has purchased 10% of the Kadokawa shares for 50 billion yen or roughly 320 million US dollars, which does let them on the board of directors and give them somewhat of a say-so, but they're not really going to have any control. Now this is basically like best case scenario because the alternatives are obviously way worse, because if you're not familiar with the whole lore of the situation, Kadokawa is actually the ones to go to Sony and actually wanted them to completely buy out their company. And the reason being is because Kadokawa corporations were going to perform a hostile takeover. They were constantly buying a bunch of shares and actually were the largest shareholder. And if you don't know, Kadokawa corporations is like some Korean company that also deal with things like media and communication, but they have just dealt with some shady business practices, and they're just not liked by a whole bunch of different people, and they have been like directly responsible for like ruining certain types of things like manga or games and whatnot. So Kadokawa corporations taking over Kadokawa would have been worst case scenario for Japanese media and obviously From Software. So to stop this, Kadokawa actually went to Sony in hopes that they actually would buy the company and stop this from happening, because obviously it feels like it's probably better for them to just go to another Japanese company. And despite what people think, Sony do actually care about their products. So if you actually were under the camp that like Sony is like the big bad company that actually wanted to go take over Kadokawa so they can fuck with From Software, that wasn't really the case. In fact, From Software is such a small little portion in this entire thing, as Kadokawa owns like so much Japanese media, mainly things like manga, and From Software only make up like 6 or 7% of the total profits. So if Sony were to actually completely buy out Kadokawa, they'd mainly be focused on things like the manga and the anime, and potentially making things like live actions, which it actually was stated in the press release, and that Kadokawa is actually looking forward to working with Sony in hopes to actually make some more live actions for their films and TV dramas, and is trying to help expand their IPs more globally, because obviously Kadokawa has more of a domestic market, whereas Sony is obviously much more widespread, so it obviously does benefit both parties. But yet this is just very much an investment for Sony and not necessarily just a complete takeover, but it actually isn't to say that Sony is not going to buy them completely in the future, because obviously it was like a very sudden thing, so I feel like Sony just weren't in the best position, but they actually had to make some type of decision right now. Because with all the rumors of Sony buying out Kadokawa, the shares obviously skyrocketed, which obviously did prevent Kadokawa from actually buying more shares and is initiating their hostile takeover. So Kadokawa did actually have to sell sooner rather than later, and this move just basically prevents that from happening. So at the very least, we have counteracted the worst case scenario. Now, what does this change mean for From Software? Basically nothing. Sony still own roughly 10 to 15% of From Software already, and now combined with the 10% that they actually own of Kadokawa, they probably get a little bit more of a say-so, but it still doesn't really make a difference. They still might potentially be a Sony exclusive in the future, but it will purely be because of From Software's decision to cooperate with them. Like, the only reason why FromSoft actually do make Sony exclusive to begin with is because potentially Sony actually come to them with the idea, give them a bunch of people to work alongside with, and give them like a very big budget, which is what happened with Bloodborne. If it wasn't for Sony, Bloodborne wouldn't have existed to begin with, because obviously Japan Studios were the ones to come up with the idea for Bloodborne and actually help develop the game too. And Japan Studios were a Sony-funded and created developer. So yeah, basically TLDR, nothing has really changed for From Software. It might change a little bit in terms of anime, because as I did mention, they might potentially make some more live actions or whatnot. And who knows, maybe they'll actually end up making some live action movies or TV shows for FromSoft related titles. That could be pretty interesting. It might mean they show a little bit more interest in making something like a Bloodborne remaster. Who knows? I feel like that's just going to happen anyway, no matter what. But yeah, that's basically the whole rundown of the situation. Hopefully it just stays like this and Kadokawa will just stay away, so that way Kadokawa can still remain business the exact same. And hopefully it spawns in some more cool things and cool collaboration types of efforts alongside Sony. But yeah, for the most part, this is just a big nothing burger, and nobody should lose sleep over this.